Muy buenos días muchas gracias por la
Good morning,
invitación
and thank you for such a kind invitation so that I can share a few thoughts about interconnection and also the power interconnections in Latin America.
Antes de entrar de lleno en lo técnico,
Before we start talking about technical matters, I wanted to share a few thoughts on what it means to be connected.
No sé si algunos reconocen esta foto.
I know some of you recognize that picture.
Esa foto
That picture is from a bridge that looks the same as you see there. It's the bridge of Alcantara. It's a 2,000-year-old bridge, and back then, we're talking 2,000 years before us. It was a symbol of development, integration, which basically interconnected the local with the global. In this case, Roman Empire. And it also meant a series of material benefits, more safety. And here you can read, transportation and also trade. It meant stability for the local region. And well, seeing how the bridge looks now, it looks like this. So no one could say that this was not planned with a long-term mentality. Actually, if I'm not wrong, in this bridge, there's the Latin inscription that says this bridge is made to last for centuries. And so that mindset of connection, development, planning, which is the reason we're here today, I think this is something that we should use as an inspiration in electric markets. And so now going into more detail, as many of you know, we are under these energy transition processes, and they have different last names in different places in Latin America and the world. Energy transition, fair energy transition, and that is what summarizes this current context. And in fair transition, that is quite complex, with goals that are conflicted. We want to have a cleaner economy. We want to make sure we have an energy supply that is growing in the region in a reliable way. And of course, we want to do that at accessible prices and to improve the comfort of citizens, our electric consumer, which is more of a technical, economical term. And so here we see what are the concepts that we're trying to balance: the supply, quality, resilience, and security. And so these are the most economical. So these can be effective, and we want people to access lower tariffs. And on the other hand, the environmental goals. And that is one of the issues. And it's one of the biggest issues that we are facing as humanity. But in the energy sector, this has been contributing to greenhouse gas effects. Now, in this context, I would dare to say that there is a consensus, a broad consensus, at least from the technical standpoint, where this type of network is necessary so that this is balanced. And this is the cover of the magazine The Economist, and it tries to communicate the fact that if we are in the battle against climate change, we should also be in the battle in favor of electric grid. And on the other hand, here you see the interconnection projects in the north to exploit the potential offshore wind, several hundreds of gigawatts in the region, and it is no easy task because these winds needs to be interconnected in a regional system, in a global system, and the member state, and in the member states of different parts of the European Union. So these are quite meaningful issues, and they also show the need to move along towards a direction where we need to develop electric grid. And then we start with interconnection, which is a subset of these type of electric grid. And there's several studies. Actually, this is a picture of a study from HECO about the value of interconnections in Latin America. And here's several projects, but here we have several links, HVDC, because it's done by HECO. So, but the message is that there's an important value in interconnection. So physically, what does it mean? That there's a diversity of resources in the region that can be shared and managed in a coordinated manner, and there's a complement even within the same resource. So hydraulic generation does not have the same patterns in different places in the region, so there could be a complement to create a service that in technical, speaking about it technically, it provides a firm system. So we could create outputs of generation that are more steady, and with that we could supply the demand with more reliability. So that's thanks to interconnection. Now there's also something that I already touched on, climate change, but I'd also like to mention here what are the issues associated to resilience, because these are historic affluents in the binational central from Itaipu, and you can see here in the graph how along the years the affluents are even less. And here the question is, how are we preparing ourselves eventually for a future, a drier future? And especially, what's the worth of cooperation at international level? So you're going to face various scenarios. And so what have we done from the university, well, and in a consortium with several technicians? We've assessed what are the benefits of interconnection. And for the nerd ones here in the room, that's a mathematical model that we used, an optimization model that is advanced, and I'm going to just spend a minute here, but it's an optimization so that we can find an economical system that can be adapted at a regional level that complies with all the quality restrictions for supply. So we need to simulate this dispatch, schedules, make sure we have the reserve and the complementary services that can allow us to provide the support. But that also has a superior level, which are the investment proposals. So we play with different types of investment, we measure the impact, and it's something we do 1,000,000 times over until there's a setup of the network, which is the best in terms of ratio cost benefit. And so that is on a large scale. And so let's talk about these benefits. And this is quite complex. So let me highlight these numbers are here. And these are the benefits or economical saving, net economical saving. And by 2035 in yellow and 2045 in blue. And so there's combinations of different scenarios. And there's some that are in the red area. And what we see here in red is what we get in the region as savings.
en generación también.
And we think that this is more efficient in terms of generation as well. And we subtract the cost of interconnection. So this is why there's a net, because it's a net value, because there's a benefit, but we are removing the costs. So this is the net benefit for consumers. So it's all considered in that number. And so you can see here that numbers are quite meaningful. We're talking about by 2035, it's about $10 million, $10 million of savings a year. And by 2045, about $40,000 million. And well, these are the benefits that are considered integration, very good integration, and so there's different levels of integration. And these are, this is a profit, much less profit in scenarios where we decide to cooperate and integrate. But we see some lack of trust from neighbors, and tradings are more about opportunity than anything else. And so you can see how even the lack of trust is being shown in the regulation, and that can expropriate value in the relevant matter. And you see how this is very relevant. And we see this as something quite meaningful. We see that by 2045, and it's a quite meaningful number. And well, when it comes to what's physical, currently it's about 20 gigawatts of interconnections in the region, and we believe that at least that should have a complete integration from now to 20 more years, and there's a report here. And as I was saying, there's trust, and the lack of trust removes value. We have quantified that, and well, you can read this carefully, but we need to move towards an integration, but we'll have different levels of integration. So which of these levels, or what should we aspire to, for example, through planning? And of course, lack of trust holds value. And lastly, I'd like to mention that integration is not innocuous. So, this is the prettiest part, integration and community value, that's quite important. But of course, you're going to face interests that are not aligned with the integration. So that means that integration is not making progress in the levels we were hoping. So there are counteracting interests. So we have winners. I'm sure we'll have some in this integration. Some countries want to import part of the generation. So that's interesting. And we'll see local generators, of course, so that we can counteract some losses. So we need to have regulation frameworks so that we can decide what we're going to do, whether it's necessary to work on it, and we need to create capacity mechanisms that will ensure the necessary revenue. Maybe they're not necessary because we can contribute with supply from other places, but these are difficult conversations, so they mean integration, cooperation, and of course, if a country decides to export, we'll have a higher price on them. We'll have higher prices, and actually, in Europe, we have seen a repercussion, and there's plans so that we can establish limits that are less than the capacity in the interconnection. So those that export are not only interested in interconnections being very big, but there's also the impact on price and the impact on consumers. And just to wrap up, 3 key points. We have the interconnections, which are key so that we can get the energy transition. And as I was saying, well, some forums are debating this, but we see a growing consensus around this. Integration has meaningful benefits. The savings that I was sharing with you, $10-20 billion per year from now to 2045, it's meaningful, and this becomes quite challenging due to the variability of costs and benefits that are part of different regions and the proliferation of losers that could come up. And of course, we need the right mechanisms so that we can make the most out of interconnections, and we have public policies, we have regulations, design market agreements between planners, which I understand that's what is the reason we're here today. Thank you.
Muchas gracias, Rodrigo. Para continuar.
Thank you, Rodrigo. Now to continue, we are going to share a few words from our moderator of this session. He is Guillermo Malini, Head of Strategic Advising in the American Association for Energy, and then he's going to be moderating the panel. Thank you, Maria Jose. Yes, I understand that it needs to be brief. Well, I was thinking, in these events, we start going in the final stage, and here in these events, sometimes start gathering concepts from different regions. So Rodrigo was talking about the Alcántara Bridge under Villegas. On an event on Monday, he was talking about the telegraph network in the 19th century. Then our president, President Chile, was talking about railroads. So if we have this deployment, that is called the great moments in humanity. So yes, we are in a challenging moment, and that allows us to, of course, organize and to have a dialogue. And of course, it's quite challenging, but in that sense, the ministers of energy in Latin America and the Caribbean, they decided to create an organization from the OLADE to organize all regional plans and start coordinating them, understanding them, and articulating them, and ideally integrating them. And yesterday, Luisa, in a conversation that we had in the planning group, we had an interesting conversation, and we said, okay, we need a planning, not plans. So a planning process, not having plans. And yesterday, the Ministry of Energy and Climate in Chile, Ministry of Energy in Chile, they presented the long-term guidelines. So we're excited about the process and all the dimensions of consultation that have been incorporated, and we understand that we need to start replicating that type of dialogue, technical dialogue, political dialogue at a regional level. And so our work agenda is proposing precisely this. And I wanted to add a comment before we started with the panel on Rodrigo's work. Rodrigo, if I am not wrong, it was $25,000 million savings a year. Yes, annually. Okay, because, in regards to the process, what I wanted to say, and of course I don't have the mathematical capacity of, sharing that, but maybe you can all imagine this with me. If we were to have all of these transmission lines and we took capacity to 300 gigabytes by 2045, and of course, then we would look at the dynamic of the process. So this will be processed in terms of generation, something that is already built. All of them have expansion plans, and they will continue expanding. And so if we don't start working in this work logic, which will allow us to not only with the parks, the power plants that we have now, if we start adding all of this and we start articulating not only transmission, but maybe some sort of agreement that will allow us to distribute infrastructure, resources, etc. So that will be a bit difficult. And yesterday, something really important happened. In the ministers' meeting, in the Andean Community for Nations, they analyzed a decision where they invite Chile to be included in the short-term Andean market. And we need to understand that, of course, there's things happening in energy in Latin America that are not only happening here. And these are important things, and in that sense, we can recognize the work of Chile and also Mariana Lee. She's been really working on it, because Rodrigo was saying something. At some point, we will need regulation processes, and of course, in the long term, Luisa said, right, there's people that say in democracy we're all the same, but some are more equal than others, So in terms of distribution, that's where we'll see that. And, international relations, it says, diplomacy is a technology. It's a tool. And so this is why Marilena from the Ministry of Energy was saying, Marilena, I'm sorry for taking too long, but it comes from an office where the executive secretariat, and it's from an integration process, bilateral, multilateral, and I think that in our institutional structures, we have capacity to start going over this process. And, we are trying to start with a dialogue process in a few more rooms right next to us, and they're discussing that, and that will allow to have energy transition. So I will stop now in a diplomatic manner, but we need to start working, we need to start considering all the experience and all of this that Chile has been working on. But if we don't put all of our efforts together so that we can reach our agreements, because the idea is to build on this, diplomatics, international organizations, etc., we will not make it. So this is what planning and not plans, that's what we need. And one last comment. They said there's winners, there's losers. So because we say that, those are replacing thermal generation, maybe they can buy cheaper energy and be more industrialized and export more. And so we start articulating the dynamic balance, not all in energy, and of course, technology and the capacity for integration, that's part of the original interest. So I think that I am moderately optimistic, and I'm really happy that we are here discussing how we're going to work for the next few years in external planning in the region. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Guido, and thank you for remaining here. Then I'm going to start calling the panel members. We'll begin with Cristina Lovillo, Energy Security Director of the National Direction of Energy of the European Union, Eloisa Borges Esteves, Director of the Studies of Energy of the Energy Research Center of Brazil, related to mine and energy. Ministry of Mine and Energy, Mariana Lee, Head of Strategic Planning and Sustainable Development from the Ministry of Energy of Chile, and I give the floor to Marina Gil Sevilla, Energy from the Economic Division for Latin America and the Caribbean, ECLAC. Then we have Ricardo Godini, Head of Programs from the International Agency of Renewable Energy, Sirena, and finally, keynote speaker, Rodrigo Moreno, Liaison Director of the University of Chile. A round of applause for them, please.
Muchas gracias y adelante, Guido.
Hola, ¿qué tal? Bueno,
Thank you very much.
me escucharon demasiado, vos también, Rodrigo.
You've heard
Escasamente te voy a dar la
a
palabra.
lot about me already, so
Bien.
or from them.
Hablábamos
So we're
de
talking about
energético. Ayer tuvimos una reunión
planning.
muy
Yesterday we
auspiciosa,
had
muy
a
linda,
very nice
sobre
meeting
avanzar en la agenda del año
on
26
progressing for the
del
agenda
Consejo Planeamiento
2026 of the
Regional.
Regional
Quería
Planning
partir entonces
Council.
dándole la palabra a
I'd
Cristina
like to give the floor
¿sí?
to Cristina Lovillo.
Es, como ya saben, una persona muy
As you
relevante
know,
en
she's
esta
very
agenda.
relevant in European
No,
energetic
Cristina, básicamente partimos de configuraciones distintas.
sector. Let's talk about different setups.
Muchos años, muchas décadas, y nosotros todo lo vamos construyendo por consenso.
We build everything by consensus over here, but you have different experiences on the energy efficiency, very different. How can we collaborate to transport all that best practices or convey these skills and best practices so we can collaborate and progress forward in us in our agenda? Thank you very much. Well, first of all, thanks for the invitation. This is something which I'm very passionate about, because I've been working very much in the European Union on this. Well, first of all, is that the integration process, generally speaking, never ends. This is a process which has its own, it's alive. We've been in more than 50 years trying to integrate this in the European Union, but there's always that step forward to take. It's not a process where we can say, look, we're integrated already, even though we have sub-processes, processes, and continuous agreements. In energy, specifically speaking, we have an article, not too legally I want to speak, but there's minutes that say that in 27 countries or members of the European Union has the absolute freedom to choose what energy they import or export. They have their own sovereignty, so we as a European Commission cannot have an influence on this decision. Nevertheless, we do have certain commitments within the European Union, which leads us to planning and integration. These commitments are very much linked to the commitments, climate commitments at an international level from the Paris Treaty and all its developments. We have the first target is to reduce the GHG gases by 2030 framework. We have worked in different frameworks to 2030, another in 2035 and 2040 until we reach 2050 with decarbonisation. And within these frameworks, we have concrete objectives of reducing GHG gases, of renewables, and energy efficiency, and also the large objectives that we have to comply with. We have concrete ideas of working in a joint fashion, us 27 countries, on how to obtain these objectives or targets which are at a European Union level. The member states of the European Union all day are planning, plan continuously all the time to submit these plans before the European Commission. And these plans, each member state establishes how they're going to reach their objectives, how they're going to attain them, and they're going to publish them so other member states can also obtain that experience. So they share the experience. It's a very important element for there to be a goodwill, a will to work together towards a common purpose. That's the first thing. And second, what is needed is transparency. Transparency. If we don't know what our neighbors are doing, we can't obtain a common purpose. That's the first lesson learned. Secondly, and I do believe that it's very important, even though we're a supranational infrastructure, we have regulations which are very complete and rigorous. We in the EU, it's very difficult for us to take 2 years to adopt the legislations, but these are regulatory frameworks which are stable and robust, which gives us a platform to work all in the same direction. It's a fundamental element. It does not mean that for the Latin America and the Caribbean it's necessary, but we do have the will and the common purpose. It's important for me. That's the most important lesson learned for myself. And we this year, the EU has become part of OLADE as a permanent observer, apart from other satisfaction and thanks from the EU. Apart from this, it gives us a starting point, which is much more robust to exchange these experiences of collaboration and also with concrete objectives. How we work in the EU on planning, interconnections, reducing emissions. And I do believe that we have a huge work ahead of us. Thank you very much, Cristina. I do see that there's more women here, which is very good. And this moment, in this energy sector at the moment, I wanted to tell Maria Elena Lee, yesterday we had a work meeting, a long term, with these experiences, in different stages here.
¿qué elementos
What
consideran ustedes,
elements would
Marilena,
you
que son
consider, Marilena,
fundamentales para
that are key for a resilient
¿Se escucha?
plan in the region?
Bueno, primero agradecer
Well,
la
first, I'd
invitación
like
a
to
estar
thank
aquí
the.
también. Sí, creo que es muy importante que
It's very important.
estemos aquí representando una opinión sobre la planificación,
We're
sobre todo, y la resiliencia
all
de los
women talking
sistemas
about planning and resilience of
Agradecer
energy.
también tu reconocimiento, Guido, en el trabajo
I'd like
que
to
hemos hecho
tell
desde el
you the work that we
Ministerio
were doing from the
de la
ministry,
importancia en
Guido,
avanzar la
and the importance of
integración y en la
advancing on
interconexión. Sí,
integration and
tuvimos esta
interconnection.
semana muy buenas
This week we
noticias,
had very good
donde
news.
cada consejo, digamos, de ministros de Relaciones
The Council
Exteriores
the
aprobaron la solicitud
a
de
committee
Chile de
of
poder
Ministries of
integrarse a la
Foreign Affairs,
8 y 6, un gran
they
avance.
passed
Falta, es
and
un
agreed
camino
to
largo,
become part of the
agradecer
other
también
16
ese
countries on
reconocimiento.
this, but I'd like to acknowledge that.
Y la integración,
Now, integration,
ahí lo quiero ligar
I want to
también
link
con
this with this
procesos de, como
process.
tú dijiste también, ayer tuvimos esta
Yesterday we
reunión del
had this
Consejo
meeting
de
from the
Planeadores,
Council
donde
of
Chile
Planners,
presentó también el
where Chile
trabajo,
submitted their
digamos, que
work
viene haciendo en la PELP. Presentamos hace
that they have
muy
been doing
poco
in the
también
PELP,
nuestra
the
PELP
ELP. We
2023-2027,
submitted our PELP
donde reconoce la resiliencia
2023-27, which
de una
acknowledges the
forma
resilience
importante en todos los escenarios.
in all
Y
scenarios.
esto se hace desde
And this is
la
carried out from the incorporation of the
pero
regulatory
también del
framework, but
fortalecimiento de la
also from
metodología.
strengthening the
Y ahí
methodologies.
estamos trabajando
And we are working
dos frentes.
here from two fronts.
Actualmente, de hecho,
Currently, we
tenemos
have
una consulta pública, el reglamento
we
de
have public consultation, the ruling of transmission as well, on storage as well, is related to this and identifies the risks
visualizarse, digamos, para enfrentar esta
to face
resiliencia y poder
this resilience
incorporarse en la planificación de la
on
transición.
planning transmission.
También, por otro lado, vemos, digamos,
We
que
have
es
also,
importante, y ayer
we see
ahí
important
tuvimos
also,
también Rodrigo, que nos apoyó en este proceso, en nuestro lanzamiento del plan
we
de
launched the
descarbonización, donde
decarbonization
el eje 2
program, where
identifica,
Axis
digamos, un
2
refuerzo de
identifies
toda la
as the reinforcement of
planificación
planning,
energética
energy
con la
planning,
incorporación de metodologías de resiliencia. Eso es muy importante, tal
with
como decía
resilience as well,
Rodrigo, poder trabajar en
methodologies.
identificación costo
So it's
efectiva
very
de la toma
important to
de
work to
decisiones
cost-effective
que
decisions
tenemos
of
que
these
tomar, digamos, para poder
that we have to
impactar
take
también
to face.
los riesgos que se identifican, digamos, también por el cambio climático. Quisiera también relevar, digamos,
I'd like
que
to,
este trabajo es un trabajo arduo,
this
que
is
hay
a
que
hard
hacer
job
consenso,
that we
digamos,
have to reach
de
consensus
metodología.
on different methodologies, of
Expansiva,
course.
soy de origen italiano y soy bien expansiva. Pero que es muy importante, digamos, que podamos trabajar
It's important that we
en esta
must
identificación y
identify and
fortalecimiento, digamos,
strengthen
de
the
la
methodology.
y es un
And this is,
trabajo que creo que es importante también recalcarlo,
it's very important to
de la
mention this.
ligazón del cambio climático,
The relation of climate
resiliencia y la
change,
planificación.
resilience and
De hecho,
planning, all these three
desde este
components
año
together.
también en el Ministerio
This
de Energía
year, from the
cambiamos un
Ministry of
poquito la
Energy, we
estructura.
changed the
Ahora,
structure.
tal como tú dijiste,
And
Guido,
as you said,
somos
Guido,
la división de
we are the
planificación
Division
estratégica y
of
cambio
Strategic
climático,
Planning and Climate
donde
Change now,
incorporamos
where we
también
include
la relación de cambio climático,
the relation
digamos,
of climate
y
change
planificación.
and
Y
planning
eso es un
between
elemento
these two
muy
things, which is
importante,
very
¿cierto? Porque
important
nos da
because
de
it
ver
gives
cómo a
us,
través de los distintos instrumentos también
allows us to
nuestro
allows us
plan
to
de
see through
adaptación
our
y
different
mitigación
elements,
es uno de los
our
pilares,
instruments,
digamos,
the
la resiliencia
mitigation programs.
fundamental para poder
It's a fundamental pillar of
avanzar
resilience to be able to progress
en
forward
esta, digamos, planificación
on this
energética que nos
energy
permita
planning
tomar
that allows
mejores
us to take
decisiones.
better decisions.
Muchas gracias, María Elena. Acerca de Eloísa. Eloísa,
So Eloisa now,
EPE, bueno, tiene ya dije, más de 2 décadas
EPE has more than more than 2
de
decades
experiencia y de desarrollo institucional
had
en estos temas.
institutional development and experience on this topic.
Es una institución
It's an institution where it's very relevant.
La primera reunión presencial
The
de
first
hicimos en Río de Janeiro.
council, we did this in Rio de Janeiro,
Eh,
Rio de Janeiro this
nos
semester.
acompañó Mauricio Tomás,
We have Mauricio Tomaski.
primer director de PE, ¿no? Entonces, ¿qué rol ves en este
What role do you
proceso
see in this
de
process
ordenamiento
of
regional
creating a regional planning
EPE
agenda which could,
en el
and what
armado de
role
esta-
can EPE
de esta
play
agenda regional de planeamiento
assembling this regional plan
un
or
rasgo
creating
ya
this
más
plan?
técnico, ¿no?
Or more in a technical sense, we've been discussing this before.
Gracias por la invitación.
Well, thank you very much for the invitation. The
Una
last
semana,
day of a
creo
whole
que
week,
intensa, pero muy
very intense
provechosa
week,
para todos.
and very fruitful for.
Y Marilena
Maria
mencionado que
Elena
somos
has
la mayoría de
mentioned
mujeres,
that
y
well,
no
the majority
puedo,
of women are here.
dejar de
And I cannot
parabenizar a Olade por la
stop
iniciativa
thinking about the initiatives
de quarta-feira
of the
de la Rede Latino-Americana de Mulheres de
Wednesday,
Energia
the
de
Latin
América Latina y
American-
Caribe. É uma
Latin American
gran,
Women's
eh,
Workshop of and the Caribbean.
Estoy misturando
I'm sorry, I'm just
la
mixing
lengua toda.
different languages here,
Gran
Spanish,
conquista
Portuguese as well.
para todos.
It's
No
been a
solo
great
para todas,
challenge
para
for all, but it
todos
was
y
a great,
todas.
successful as well.
Bom, planejamento.
On planning,
trabaja mucho tiempo
EPE
con
has
planejamiento de
been
largo, con
working very
planificación
much
energética de largo
on
plazo.
energy planning in the
Pero
long
es
term.
importante notar
But it's very important to
que
mention that
para la integración energética,
for the
una
energy
planificación
integration,
conjunta es fundamental. Rodrigo lo mostró.
planning
con
is
números,
fundamental.
con cálculos,
Rodrigo mentioned this
que
with
há
the
vantagens
figures,
concretas
what
para
the
los
concrete
países.
advantages for countries,
Pero a
the advantages
integración
it gives,
é mais do
all the
que
benefits. But the
solo
integration,
construir
apart from just
meia
to
dúzia de linhas de transmissão, um
create,
pouquinho mais de
build
dutos, não é só isso.
putting up more transmission lines, and it's more than this, but to have a comprehensive view
E como a
within the
PEP
region
pode contribuir,
and to
poder
see how
ajudar,
we can help each other and
nesse
contribute
sentido.
in this sense amongst all of us.
Podemos contribuir com uma
We can
plataforma de
contribute
cooperação regional.
with a regional
E nuestro
cooperation
papel
plan.
seria compartilhar
And our role
metodologia,
would be
compartilhar
to
modelos,
share methodologies, models,
compartilhar
to
práticas de
share
construção
best
de
practices,
cenários que hablamos,
creating
ayer.
scenarios as well that we
E-
talked
pero
yesterday,
também compartilhar
but also to share
como
the
transformar
ways how we can transform these studies and plans
reales.
in real
Porque
public
hoy no
policies,
queremos
real
solo
policies.
papeles, no
Because we
queremos
don't just
solo
put paper now, everything on paper,
planos
or just
bonitos
designs
quedam
and
lá no
nice
internet
plans
e
that just
no
remain on the
transformam
internet and not really
coisas
turned
reais
into
para las
real
populaciones. E Brasil
solid
historicamente ha recebido delegações de
things
toda
for
a
the
região,
population. So Brazil has considered this
para trocas, para aprender
to
sobre como
exchange and learn how to
concretamente
implement
su base de
concretely
energia,
from the
como
energy
implementamos su
basis,
parte de
how
transmissão,
we, the transmission part, how to learn from all,
coordenar
and how to
las
coordinate
subastas, las rondas de licitación de óleo y
the
gas,
tender
políticas de eficiencia
processes
energética,
of oil and gas,
y con
energy
esta
efficiency
experiencia,
policies, and with our
cómo
experiences
construir
on how
políticas
to
públicas
create public
efectivas,
policies which are
traducen
effective,
en
that which can
inversiones
translate in
para los
investments
países,
for countries
y ganos. Penso que
in
compartilhar
equal manner.
experiências
To share
e
experiences, I
empezar a
believe,
hacer
to start
uma
to
planificação conjunta
plan in a joint
permite que
fashion
países
allows
que enfrentam
countries
desafios
that face
similares
similar challenges
possam acelerar seus
they can
processos.
accelerate their
E mesmo
processes,
países que não
and
enfrentam
the same
possam
countries
aprender
that do
com
not
os
face any, they can learn from
Digo muito a
different
minha,
trial and
minha
error.
equipo
I tell my team very much
que
so that
vamos a tener
we will
novos
have
erros.
new
Não lo mismo
challenges.
já o hicimos. Quero novos erros, porque é assim que evitando a repetição de
Well,
errores que
and
avançamos.
to avoid a repeat
Entonces,
error is a mistake. That's how you
EPE
work
es
forward,
muy
trial and error. So
EPE
EPE
está muy
is
empeñada
is very
em
much
colaborar
targeted
com
in
OLADE,
collaborating
em
with
avançar com a
OLADE
planificação
in
regional,
progressing with regional
porque
planning,
creemos
and
que
because we do believe
aumentar as
that to
capacidades de
increase the
planificação de
capacity of
todos os
planning
países,
from all
para que
countries,
assim possamos começar uma planificação
and we can
regional,
start a regional planning
fundamental
is
para
fundamental, I believe,
termos uma verdadeira
to have a
integração.
true
De
integration.
novo, não só
Once again, not
linhas de
just
transmissão
transmission
lá e cá, não
lines,
só
A to B,
gasodutos lá e cá.
or gasoducts,
Pero
or
visão
pipelines, gas pipelines from one to the other,
de
but
região.
a shared vision as a
Esto que
region.
será el grande ganho.
This will be the main benefit, I believe. Thank you, Eloisa.
Ahora le quería
Now I'd like to
preguntar
ask
al estimado
Ricardo Borini from IRENA,
que, bueno, también viene de
and
P,
from
digamos la verdad.
EPE as well, from EPE as well.
Lo
Eh,
emprestamos a Irene.
We lent him to IRENA.
cambió Río por Bonn.
He
Vamos a hacer más comentarios.
changed Rio de Janeiro from somewhere else.
Ricardo,
So, Ricardo,
básicamente preguntarte,
I'd like to
ustedes,
ask you,
en acuerdo con el gobierno brasileño,
according to the
tomaron
Brazilian
el
government,
secretario
you took the
de
secretariat of the
Global
club.
Brasil lanzó
Brazil launched
presidencia del G20 y del Energy
the
Transition
G20 and the
¿Cuál es
working
tu
group of
visión
energy
de
working group.
colaboración
But my
del
question is, what
secretariado
you believe
global
the agreement between the Global Secretariat and the Regional Council and what we're developing here at a regional level? I mean, how do you see that articulation?
Muchas gracias, Guido. Creo que
Thank you,
empiezo
Guido.
con felicitaciones
I'm
por
going
el
to start
evento.
congratulating you for
El
this
video
event.
muy bueno, toda la
The context very good. The participation has been great. In other words, we need this to share part of this process, as we say. So you're doing this already. I congratulate you.
Y para quien no conoce, o sea, la Global
For those who do not know, the
Coalition
Global Question
tiene
Planning
Brasil como líder,
has
como
Brazil
parte del
is
proceso
a
de
leader
negociación
of this
del
discussion
G20.
process in the
O sea,
L20.
Global Coalition Energy
G20,
Planning, GCP,
Quality,
como lo llamamos ahí,
GCP,
para
Global
los
Planning.
íntimos, ¿no? O sea, la idea
GCP,
es
basically.
justo
The idea
mirar hacia
is
lo que es inversión,
to
riesgo,
regard
planificación.
investment, risk,
Cómo
and planning,
viabilizar
and how to make feasible,
the
therefore,
risking process
the
como
risking
parte de
process
esta
as
discusión,
part
¿no?
of this discussion.
Y en ese sentido, hay dos
In this sense, there are two
puntos
main
o work streams, ¿no?
work
Uno,
streams.
justo entender lo que es,
One is to
a nivel
understand, rightfully,
político,
at
junto con
a
las
political
instituciones
level, together with the
financieras,
financial
digamos,
institutions,
con la planificación
with
ministerial, digamos así,
ministerial planning,
cuáles son los retos, cuáles son los
what
puntos
are
que
the
hay que
challenges
avanzar,
or the
¿no?
points where we have to work on
Implementar.
and implement.
Y hay otro nivel que es
And there's
un
another
poco más
level, which is a little bit
técnico,
more
donde
technical,
se comparte,
where we
donde se,
share.
digamos, están los diferentes challenges, por ejemplo,
We have different challenges,
información,
information,
¿no? Data, modeling,
data,
todo lo que es
modeling, and
la parte
everything,
más instrumental,
all more
digamos,
instrumental side,
donde hay
let's say,
mucho
where there's
todavía
a
que hacer.
there's a lot to be done
Entonces,
yet.
solo empiezo con
So I just wanted to start off with mentioning this.
justo porque eso es una construcción colectiva.
It's a collective construction that
O
is
sea,
needed here.
La idea es que tener
The idea is to have,
aquí en nombre de Irena y del gobierno de Brasil,
and on
para
behalf of the
esa-
government of Brazil
esa
and
invitación
Irena,
que todos ahí interesados
we invite all of you,
se conecten
all
a
of you
esa-
to
a esa
connect
iniciativa, ¿no?
to this initiative or to link
Tenemos,
yourselves.
información ahí disponible
We
en
have
nuestra
information
web,
relevant,
cómo es el proceso y
available in
ese es
our
un
web
proceso
about the
donde
process.
justo,
And this is something where
juntos
we are
desarrollamos
working
lo que hay que hacer.
together, developing what
Y
is
ese
needed
proceso, y
in
es
this
lo que
process.
preguntaste, o sea, necesariamente
On your question,
a nivel regional,
at a regional
se
level,
implementan las acciones, a nivel nacional,
this is where we implement the
Entonces,
actions, regional and
estamos ahí
national level.
con
So
ustedes,
we are there together, working with
si
you
es necesario.
on whatever is
Ya
necessary.
hablamos un poco
We
también
have
de las
mentioned already
posibilidades
where the possibilities
cooperación.
of cooperation
Nosotros,
lie.
en Irena también,
In Irena,
con el soporte de la Comisión
with the support from
Europea,
the European
estamos
Commission,
desarrollando,
we are
vamos a
developing
publicar durante la
also,
COP,
we're going to publish during the
lo
COP,
que es el Energy Transition Outlook
the-
para Sudamérica,
the
donde
tradition,
justamente
the
es una
South
aporte, una
American
información,
contribution. It's a
pero más allá de eso, ¿no? De lo que son los
report which is beyond the
sector,
possible
más allá
roadmaps
de
per
eso
sector.
tenemos
But
justo,
beyond this, we
el
have
proceso de desarrollo, el
the
proceso
process
de
of development,
el
the
proceso de
engagement
modeling,
process, the
el
modeling
proceso de data,
process,
etcétera.
and
O sea,
data all
mucho
included
que
there.
podemos y estamos ahí dispuestos, ya ofrecemos
There's a lot
para
there
compartir y para
to be
explorar
shared
las
and to
posibilidades.
explore together the different possibilities.
Hay ideas concretas dentro de
There
la
are concrete
Global
ideas
Coalition,
within the
¿no? Que estamos
global coalition that we discuss
Brasil.
together
El
with Brazil.
próximo evento
The next
está,
event
presupuesto durante
will
la
be during
COP.
the COP.
En
In November, we
tenemos
will
ahí
have a
high-level
high-level
discussions,
discussions
¿no? Paneles y todo eso, donde estaremos
and
presentando
panels where we'll
más
be
detalles de la
presenting in more
Global
detail what is the global
Y una vez
coalition.
más,
And once again,
eso se realiza a nivel regional.
this is carried out at a regional
Los
level.
exchanges, las
The exchanges
informaciones entre países,
of
pero a
information
nivel
amongst countries, but at a
donde,
regional level,
hay
this is
una
the place where there is
¿no?
opportunity
de beneficios
to see the
entre los
benefits
países.
amongst
Y, por
countries
supuesto, podemos explorar un poco más algunos de los puntos de los estudios, si me permite, más
and
tarde.
share studies
Paro
as
por
well.
aquí. Gracias una vez
That's it for
más.
now, and thank you very
Muchas
much.
gracias, Ricardo.
Thank you, Ricardo.
Yo, Rodrigo, te voy a dejar para el final.
Well,
esto dice.
Rodrigo, I'll leave you for till the
no,
end,
yo te
but
quería
I
molestar,
wanted
Marina,
to
ahora,
ask Marina,
porque ustedes desarrollaron
because you
varios años
developed
atrás
many
un
years ago
programa muy
already
exitoso
a
que
very
ustedes
successful program
desarrolló,
together with
que
EPS,
es el Foreplan, un programa de cooperación técnica en
a technical
planeamiento,
cooperation plan
y
on
trabajamos
specifically focused on
en
planning.
todo
And we work
ese
together
desarrollo, tanto
on the
local como
development
nuestro. ¿Cómo ves,
of this. So
para
how do you
2026 y
see
su
for
fase
2026
europea,
and
los esfuerzos
onwards
de
the
cooperación
efforts
técnica
of
y la
technical
consolidación de
cooperation
la plataforma
and the
regional
consolidation of a
como
regional
el
platform?
micrófono.
Claro que sí. Muchas gracias, Guido.
Thank
Gracias
you,
por
Guido.
la invitación, por la pregunta. Efectivamente, nosotros desde la
Well,
CEPAL
we from
venimos,
ECLAC, we have been
trabajando desde hace
working
bastantes
for
años, desde
many years
2018,
now,
en
since
un foro
2018,
regional de
on a regional
planificadores
forum
energéticos,
for
que ha sido
energy
una
planners, which has been
plataforma
a
técnica
platform, a
de
technical
intercambio de
platform
experiencias en la
of exchange for
región,
exchanging
pero
experiences in the
también
region,
un punto
but
de
also
encuentro
a
para
point of
identificar
encounter
prioridades
to
y
identify
poder construir
priorities and to build
juntos también
together also
metodologías,
different methodologies,
herramientas
tools
y
to
una serie de
develop
proyectos
a
que
series of
puedan apoyar la
products which can
planificación
support the planning
energética en los
process
países.
of energy, of
Desde
power of different
nuestra
countries. Now, from our point of
como
view,
vemos de aquí al futuro,
how we see the
la
future,
consolidación de estos
the
espacios
consolidation of
o
these
el impacto
areas or the
más,
impact which is more
regional
regional
de estos espacios,
regarding these spaces,
está
well,
la CEPAL ve varias o varios caminos o
We
varias
have
necesidades
many, we see many things and many needs in the future. Well, first is to consolidate this political institutionality or this political impact in a better fashion regarding the planning of different countries and region and in the region. It seems to us that, effectively speaking, the work that we have had with the Council of Integration last year has been a very good effort because we can see that the Council, this committee, or the platform of the Council can convey the importance, so the political importance of how energy planning has for the importance it has for the region, to give it more a political commitment, sort of to progress towards a more robust planning for the region. We believe that that is vital. Also, one of the other points that we believe that can contribute for this platform to be strengthened is sustainability in terms of governance and finance. Regarding governance, it believes to us, we believe that within the region there's a lot of efforts already, not just plans which that summons us. But countries like Brazil, Chile, these are countries which have given have been examples, given examples on top of the table on how to plan, and other countries can learn from the experience. But Irena also, and yesterday in the meeting that we had of the Council, we had see that there's a lot of work in the region being carried out with many countries. With a lot of efforts from international institutions as well to consolidate this regarding one, governance, strengthening and financing, and the political will. This seems to us it's key. Thank you, Marina. We count with you then. Yes, very much so. Rodrigo Moreno has spoken very much about this, but could you tell us, please, how do you see what Eloisa said, planning for integration? What's the relation in this sense between... We're talking about interconnections, and Eloisa said interconnection is not the same as integration necessarily. I'd like to ask you about this, the qualitative difference. Those spontaneous questions are the most difficult ones to answer. It wasn't within the script. No, well, of course, it's not enough just to add infrastructure. And maybe the best example of this reality is what happens to us today. There is a report prepared by Olade at the beginning of the first semester last year, where the factors of use were shown of the current networks, or the current interconnections, and these are very low factors, let's say. And this shows that what Eloisa was saying, we have infrastructure, but we need to have more to be able to carry out transactions and to utilize efficiently this infrastructure. This is where public policies, regulations, and market design enters in play, different mechanisms which can facilitate the transfer of costs and benefits. I like very much an example from a professor who said to me once, but interconnections, if they were free interconnections, it's still an issue, because there are changes of positions and we have to convey benefits as well, transfer one to another, not just to share costs of infrastructure. It's not just that. And Europe is a good example of this, where there are mechanisms and compensation and transaction sort of mechanisms, funds, where basically we can create this instrument, this fund, basically allows to achieve higher level of integration and a better use of networks also. Of course, these have to go hand in hand. Cooperation, market design, the use of our networks, and we have to expand these networks. That's where planning is key. These networks, which have to, of course, once we render services, which are community services, it's not just services encapsulated in one nation. So these services as they are more regional, quicker.
Pero Cristina, deja planteado a Rodrigo una agenda, porque ya empezamos,
So-
desde que ustedes ingresan permanentes oficialmente, una agenda de colaboración técnica en diversos temas, pero como comentábamos hoy más temprano y como se viene conversando esta
Well, as we
semana,
were saying earlier, and this
hay una
week,
necesidad de avanzar más rápido en
we
integración,
see matters of integration,
dando mucho la integración
but we are all looking at regional integration, electric integration. So
¿qué significa
what Rodrigo was saying, what does it mean so that the audience can understand your incorporation in our institution in terms of, in terms of steel? Well, I am quite optimistic. We see they can decide with renewables, nuclear, because we don't produce any fossil fuels. It's not about sustainability. And in that path, we also need the experience of Latin America, the Caribbean. And so these needs are very interesting. Europe is quite small in comparison to big challenges in Latin America and the Caribbean. But I think our integration experience is probably a small model of inspiration. And I don't want to take too long, but we could set a small example of what it's been in Europe to have an interconnected market. So we had a crisis 3 years ago, energy crisis, the biggest one in the European Union, especially with the Russian invasion. They decided to cut the European Union supply, and we had to work with the most affected countries, Slovakia, the Czech Republic, and Hungary, countries that receive more gas from Russia. And we decided to stop that dependency because we have a market that is interconnected and has electric infrastructure. In countries such as the Czech Republic and Hungary, and the stream, they have received gas in different routes, Germany, Poland, Italy, Croatia, and this is because we have very good interconnection. And so in Europe, we have been working for 50 years, but even if they are not similar cases, I think they can be inspiring examples for different areas in Latin America. So sharing the way we do things, and in the future I think we'll have several things that we'd like to collaborate on, and we have received the dramatic experience of having just one gas supplier, and we don't want the same to happen with critical minerals. So I think that this is an important field to work with Latin America, Chile, Argentina, Brazil, so that we can diversify, and something that we have discussed for quite some time, new clean technologies, so it's some technical issues. And Latin America, in that sense, needs to be a pioneer in clean energy. So I think that this collaboration needs to be more and more intense. And so what clean technologies can... And well, I'd like to improvise a little. Marina mentioned something that I think is fundamental, and it was also with Carla Primavera, and it's to do with planning and financing. And
Pero me gustaría que cada uno de los tres haga un comentario.
I'd like for each of you to just add a comment.
Si nos hacemos cargo de la herramienta del planeamiento.
If we are of course, being responsible, and we are working towards developing countries, and we want to be accountable. Of course, we have such tough experiences. Gustavo, can you share a little bit about your experience taking accountability? Well, gladly. First, I'd like to say that it's interesting just to mention clear goals of planning. So to connect countries, it's really important to understand what are the drivers. Why do we have issues in the region? That is in the head of policymakers, right? And so we need to start understanding the win-win, right? It's important to understand what the benefits are. And beyond energy benefits, that's the connection where with the benefits of the value chain and integration view, and looking at the value chain and adding different segments, market segments. And so it's an integration process that it's not only about energy, it's just a context, and that's also part of the specific question. That's the approach. So it's not only a plan, but planning. And that is the view, you know, not only the National and Social American Bank of Development, but the idea is for us to explore what are the specific points so that we can have sustainable development, and what's the risk that we need to treat so that we can avoid the thousands of investment per year. So it's about to 2050, I think. And in the study, we are going to reach numbers, and only in the electric sector, if we have one system, we need about 5 by 2050 in terms of gigawatts, so that you have an idea. And so Brazil is a success case. I don't know if you all know, but Brazil has managed to reach a maturity in the market, the electric market, investments, and it's a public-private association, and that is considered in the paper. So the development on planning, and that's you know, the market, contracts, bilateral contracts, the risk clauses, and of course the transmission planning, governance of the process, transparency, different exchange with the private sector. All of the risk points were identified, and it's a process. And I remember Dr. Miranda, who always had this phrase, you know, it's a dynamic and adaptive process. So it's a risk during the process. So that is planning, and that's the scalability. And so it's not something, it's a single shot, it's, you know, continuous, it's something continuous, and it's a one-stop shop, and it's to work together during the process. And of course, the Inter-American Development Bank had a very important role, and also specific financing programs, but that's what's important for a bank in the planning process, in the regulation process. So that's what I meant. These are concrete things that we need to consider and that we need to share between countries, and that is an initial point of discussion and for interconnection projects. And then, of course, when the mature market, the private sector comes in, and that's what's necessary, the transparent regulation, and that's where the systemic is risk and projects were decreasing.
billones de inversión.
So it was millions and millions of, thousands of millions of investment, thousands of kilometers,
de la generación
and the
renovable
expansion of renewable generation that was very successful, not only in wind power, solar power, biomass. And so this is really interesting, and it could set an example for regional integration.
Gracias, Ricardo.
So I think that this is a process. Thank you. I'd like to recommend this work because it was signed by Ricardo Rini and Carla Primavera, the Director of Energy in the bank, the Social Development Bank for Development in Brazil. Jimena, I'd like to listen about financing as well.
É muito importante compreender
It's very important to understand the relation.
que hace el planejamento, que hace la planificación, dá diretrizes. E estuve pensando como
So I was there's several directions, and I wanted to see how to illustrate.
discurso,
And I don't know if you have seen a speech
de Federer, que há uma
vez from Federer,
na internet, muitas
and it was shown on internet several times. We said that he's considered one of the biggest champions of all time, but he's only won 52% of his titles. So he's made a lot of mistakes. But all points of dispute, you know, he plays with the intention of winning, so planning is the same. So yes, we make more mistakes than what we actually accomplish, but it's not about numbers, it's understanding. Our countries understand what needs to be done. What do we need to think to get results in 5, 10, 20 years? And along the process, we adjust, but trends and opportunity, they are set there. And so if we do that with clarity, we decrease the risk on investments. Because the private sector does not need to know whether in 2050 we'll have 500 million megawatts or 505 million megawatts. So it does not matter. But the direction of electrification and the need for investment in transmission lines, that is important. And so planning goes beyond that. But for that, once again, I will repeat myself again, we need to unify the directions, because it's really difficult if each country takes one path that is very different. We cannot make the most out of opportunities for synergy between countries. We cannot make the most out of opportunities, and then we will not learn in the future. And so planning with instruments is fundamental to clarify, to looking at investors. So what is the path in Latin America? That's fundamental. Thank you. Yes, we need to provide signs. Would you like to mention something about that? Well, since we can improvise a little. Well, I'd like to mention the comment on Ricardo, why it's not. We can see how their value chains are also part of the financing. We need to look at the role and support on energy planning, and to manage to get a consistent funding. CEPAL, that's the Economical Commission for Latin America and the Caribbean. It does not only work in energy, but we work in other areas policy, and in terms of the division, we're trying to strengthen
en cadenas de valor de la transición
value
energética
chain,
en el mundo, que los países de la región tienen distintas características.
and we need to understand that there are different characteristics, conditions, and that not everyone is going to follow the same recipe. And so we need to have directions on it, and so that they are strong and consistent, and they can attract financing.
No tanto como financiar nosotros, pero
And
sí.
so it's not so much financing, but having good public policies and planning to
Gracias.
consolidate this.
Quería preguntar a María Elena, que puede improvisar también si quiere, pero yo justamente ayer
Well,
escuchamos una exposición
yesterday we were listening to your presentation in a work meeting on the process of planning, long-term planning.
Lo que más me llamó la atención es todo el proceso
Particularly what calls my attention is all consultation processes.
Preguntarte a vos que llevas la experiencia,
And
¿qué te parece que hay como singularidades, ¿no? En la
and you know, what are the singularities in Chilean planning, and what are the findings that can contribute
que está mirado, porque yo te lo digo, esto nos pasa mucho que
in a
muchos
process?
países de América Latina miran este proceso y nos han hablado con muchísimo interés. Entonces,
It's
tal vez
been quite
preguntarte cuál es la
interesting. So,
singularidad que hace que
what are the singularities?
Gracias, Guido. Sí, bueno, yo aquí también tomo lo
Thank
que
you,
decía,
Guido.
yo creo que los desafíos y lo
Well, I
importante
think
también
challenges
poder,
and
la
what's
planificación es un
important,
sistema vivo. Nosotros
planning
también,
is a life
tres procesos,
system.
digamos, de planificación, estamos iniciando
There are
este
some planning
proceso
processes.
de la
We're
planificación,
starting with this new 2028, 2032 planning, and we have a 5-year planning, but with a relation framework that is also important. And especially participation is important, and we need to incorporate all visions, all scenarios, everything that incorporates
esta experiencia, digamos, que ha tenido Chile, que muchos hemos aprendido de estos procesos, digamos, que hemos ya cumplido.
and we have been able to see all processes, and it's important to share that regionally, internationally, and I think that the challenges on energy transition and planning and a live process, it's necessary for all of us to collaborate, and I think it's important to continue with the work of rallying the Council, and also thanking CEPAL, and especially in terms of how to incorporate the vision.
Como se mencionaba, tener esa visión, esa proyección de futuro.
Looking at that projection in the future, and what is the route, and to incorporate all of these elements in a consistent manner. And it's important to know this, and it's also an instrument for public policy. So this is why reinforcing cooperation and integration, I think we're very ambitious, but we've always been ambitious. And so it's important for us to have a minimum criteria in terms of how we need to plan in a region, and how we need to make progress and establish a route that is compatible with energy transition, with the different transitions that are in the region, as our executive secretary always mentions, and that is important to, that's why it's important to push these events, the council, and the support of international organizations. Thank you, Elena.
Doctor Moreno,
Dr. Moreno, any closing remarks since we're improvising? Planning, knowledge, technical knowledge, modeling, things that you have been working on for quite a while. I'd like to ask something particular. The technical challenge, dialoguing with all the tools, everything that has to do with technical, with process, is so difficult to harmonize and to discuss tools and to move along in that sense. You made me think about a joke. Someone said politicians don't agree on anything. That's why transition does not move along. And then you ask politicians, they say, no, technicians are not agreeing on anything. That's why we're not moving along. So moving forward. So to be honest, the complexity of integration, and we need to consider technical matters, and we need to see what is needed for an efficient and optimal exchange in Latin America, and that could be great progress. But from then and being able to materialize the infrastructure and then using the interconnections, this is something entirely different. And so I think the technical issue, being technical, it's easier than the rest. So that is what I think. On Tuesday, I think Professor Michael Plodge from Cambridge was here, and I was lucky enough to discuss the same topic with him, and he said, integration from the technical standpoint is not that complicated, because in the end you need an algorithm, then being able to do trading, but you don't even need a harmonization. So just enabling so that someone from one country can work and make transactions in other places, and also finding interconnections. And from the technical standpoint, it does not look so complex. So, of course, we need to be able to truly understand how each of the regulations are. We consider the Nordic experience, European experience, and there are elements where we may be able to find a technical response, but that's a rest. And then politicians, diplomats, they also need to help us. Well, thank you, Rodrigo. Thank you for, because you really think that I think it's quite humble to consider that, technical matters are easy to solve. But, well, maybe, I don't know, Elisa, I just wanted to share a counterpoint, if I'm allowed. Latin America and the Caribbean are countries that come from very different realities. Some countries have strong agencies, quite solid. Others don't. And yesterday we were talking about first challenge was maybe we are all on the same base. But there are international associations, yes, but Brazil is not compliant with some regulations. Other countries are not either. But if we compare data, we need to consider what's the entire region. And so it's possible. It's not very difficult from the technical standpoint, but let's not forget that countries have institutional realities are completely different, and that is something that we need to consider before we move along. Well, yes, Eloisa, the heterogeneity that is characterizing the region is quite rich. Well, I think this is the last time I'll be speaking in the event publicly, so I wanted to really thank everyone for joining us in the panel, and we'll have a we'll be closing during the afternoon. But I think that yes, it's quite successful. It's a pleasure having all of you here, and the enthusiasm, which is what we get from conversations, and not only conversations, but a bit of gossip. We'll talk to someone and then letting you know that they talked to someone else and sharing what they were discussing. So that really helps us so well. Thank you. Thank you. I'd like to invite our panelists to take a picture, please. Thank you, so that we can wrap up the session. And well, you're all invited to enjoy the lunch break, and we'll meet back at 2 p.m. Thank you.